If by chance you've never heard of the Luigi's Mansion franchise, that's completely understandable. The original intention of the first game was to show off the GameCube's new controller, which featured dual joysticks and pressure-sensitive buttons. Common features now, but they were fairly new at the time. It was never meant to be more than one game, but a cult following pushed it to being a franchise after more than a decade. Now, with Luigi's Mansion 3, all of the fun ghost hunting has gotten full VIP treatment without trying to show off system features or quirky hardware gimmicks. The result is fairly good. The experience of capturing ghosts is plenty fun, there are lots of collectibles to search for, vacuuming up money is satisfying, and there's no shortage of puzzles for you to scratch your head over. The good things here are pretty solid. However, the problems will make your mileage vary. In other words, depending on your perspective, the bad things will either come off as annoying nuisances or major mood killers. And that is what makes giving this game a rating of buy or pass rather difficult. To flesh out the problems with Luigi's Mansion 3, we have to start with everything that does work and make the game fun. Right off the bat is the vacuum, or poltergust, which you use to suck up every mischievous apparition as well as the valuables in the game. This includes coins, bills, gold bars, pearls, and gems. It can't be understated just how satisfying it is to just clean up room after room and hope you find a pillow stuffed with cash or a golden rat that explodes into coins and gold bars when you hit it with your flashlight. Collecting money is a secondary goal, but so satisfying it nearly trumps the process of finding and catching the actual ghosts. On the note of ghosts though, there's a myriad of them, ranging from a dozen generic that serve as vacuum fodder to special golden and crystal variants that drop loot, distinct boss ghosts that you chase through each level of the hotel, classic Mario boos that hide on floors you've cleared, and special rare ghosts that only appear in multiplayer. As you'd expect from a game all about catching ghosts, there's no shortage of them to stuff into your magic vacuum. Now, for the most part, catching these vaporal freaks is pretty straightforward. Your aim is to charge your flashlight and deliver a bright burst of light to stun them, then start sucking them up. A new mechanic in this game is how, after you've gotten any ghost firmly enough in your grasp, you can swing them around and slam them onto objects for extra damage. This is a particularly cathartic thing to do with some of the more difficult bosses, and when fighting a team of basic ghosts, it's a lot of fun to wail on some of the baddies with their friend as you swing them around. Because there are so many ghosts, things rarely get old too, as the game continues to steadily introduce new apparitions as you climb the tower. Even after all the generic enemies are introduced though, things still get stirred up as they'll begin to defend themselves against your flashlight, forcing you to figure out how to disarm them first. This does bring us to a different concern though, and where some of the troubles begin. Bosses, and how you go about battling them. Luigi's Mansion 3 takes place in a haunted hotel, which is a towering 17-story building, and each floor is defended by its own boss ghost. Defeating these bosses ranges from fights that are easy and straightforward to annoyingly gimmicky to just boring waiting games. When you battle most normal enemies, everything is dependent on your immediate ability to disarm and stun them, and at worst, some ghosts turn invisible or hide so you have to tease them out. With bosses though, they mostly remain fully invulnerable while they cycle through a series of actions. You can't force them to show their weaknesses. Thus, you control the pace of battle throughout most of the game right till you reach a boss. Then, you're stuck playing on their time and there's nothing you can do about it. To make matters worse though, if a boss battle isn't a big waiting game, then it'll almost certainly have a super annoying gimmick. This happens less frequently, but when it does, it changes with each boss. These gimmicks range from a one-time use awkward control scheme, to turning out the lights while playing a game of mix-em-up, to just being forced to keep track of and awkwardly maneuver a handsaw of all things. Overall, these gimmicks aren't all that frequent, and depending on your perspective, they're just a natural escalation of difficulty. What's certain though, is how the gimmicks in boss battles are dwarfed by just having to play the waiting game. Just dodge attacks for a while till the boss is ready to do that one thing where you can force a weakness open. Before that moment though, don't push the battle forward. Just wait till you're allowed to move it forward. As a result, boss battles aren't all that engaging, and represent more of a weak spot for the entire game. Now, that's not great, but sadly, they're in competition with something else for being the worst part of the game. While the lion's share of Luigi's Mansion 3 is a hauntingly lovely straightforward jaunt from each themed floor of the Last Resort Hotel, it occasionally decides to commit the cardinal sin of forced backtracking. This happens 3 separate times, with the first and third ones being the most annoying and egregious. The general progression of the game is tied to the elevator and how it's missing buttons. After beating the boss of each floor, you gain a new elevator button so you can further ascend the tower. However, on 2 occasions, no sooner do you recover and screw in a new button to only have it stolen by a spectral cat that runs off with it to a floor you've already cleared. By far, this is the most aggravating feature of the story mode, and it adds nothing to the game. No additional areas, no new loot, no special ghosts to catch, just a wild goose chase covering ground you've already seen and left behind. It's unnecessary time padding that the game would be better off without. On a related note, Luigi also has a bad case of butterfingers and loses buttons not long after he's picked them up. Several times throughout the game, you'll do the work to get another button, only for Luigi to drop it down a stairwell or have a rat come in and steal it at the last minute. These moments are less annoying than the full-on backtracking segments, but it's a joke that's pulled far too often. It's actually endearing and a bit funny the first time it happens, but the 3rd or 4th time a button gets taken right before Luigi grabs it, well, by then it's just old, worn out, and needs to be put out to pasture. Further related to sidetracking and backtracking is the constant ghost spawn on levels of the hotel you've already cleared. If you're a completionist or just love exploring, this is something that will get in your way often. Okay, wait, I just want to pause here and point out to the unobservant that voluntary and forced backtracking are not the same thing. If you backtrack on your own, it's because you're enjoying yourself, maybe achievement hunting or the like, while being forced to backtrack is not about enjoyment. It's revisiting areas only because you have to. The point is that motivation matters, especially when it comes to returning to old areas in any game. Anyway, as I was saying, if you venture back through the hotel to look for secrets, collectibles, or booze that hide on completed floors, you'll have to contend with new enemies in the old areas. Now, this isn't a game-breaking problem, it's just an inconvenience, especially when you consider that cleared rooms remained ghost-free in the older games in the franchise. Again, this isn't a game breaker, it's just pretty annoying to be stuck fighting a bunch of generic ghosts when you're only trying to treasure hunt. That's more or less everything to Luigi's Mansion 3, but there's one last thing to touch on: the game's cinematic nature. The only real reason to bring this up is because the games in the Luigi's Mansion franchise, before now, have all been fairly devoid of cinematics past the absolute basics. In a big way, this is because the first game was a launch title meant to show off the capabilities of the GameCube. With all of the polish on this 3rd installment though, Luigi's Mansion is now an incredibly expressive game with the various boss ghosts more fleshed out, and it's done without most of them ever uttering a single word too. The point is, there's a lot of great charm in the regular sequences you get, from Luigi meeting his next big enemy, or the final pose each one strikes just as you capture them. There's a lot of character and expression here that's plenty entertaining. Admittedly, all the cinematics do get in the way if you go for a second playthrough and just want to get to the ghost catching, but with most of the sequences skippable, it's hardly a real problem. Luigi's Mansion 3 is overall a great game, but at the end of the day, your mileage will vary. Capturing ghosts is great fun, collecting valuables is nothing but greed-filled glee, and watching the various ghosts express themselves will probably make you chuckle more than a few times. However, the backtracking you're forced into and the waiting you do during many of the boss battles can either mildly annoy you or turn you off completely. These two things had the latter effect on me, and I found myself wanting to stop playing when at a boss due to sheer boredom. At the end of the day though, even these things didn't make the fun parts any less fun, which is why I'll probably go back and play it again, and even recommend Luigi's Mansion for a buy. Thanks for watching and listening. I'm William Strife, and these videos are made possible through viewer donations at strife.solutions. If you haven't already, please consider contributing so I can continue making them. I hope to see you in another video, another time. Until then, Strife out.